Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Darsh Shah.
And I'm Dr. Altamash Raja.
And welcome to Medicine Redefined,
a podcast where we will explore the often overlooked but necessary components of health, what we consider to be the fundamentals.
We will investigate topics and practices that can give you and your patients the best chance to optimize a healthy lifestyle. It's time to move the needle forward and put the health back in healthcare. Our guest today is Robert Soler. He's the Vice President of Biological Research and Technology at BIOS, also known as the Biological Lighting Institute. Now, prior to his work with BIOS, he was most known for his work with the Kennedy Space Center, where he helped design and build the first LED light for use on the International Space Station. He collaborated with scientists to use LED light for photobiological purposes in space, including circadian lighting systems designed to synchronize circadian rhythms of astronauts aboard the space station. He has a Master's of Science degree from the Lighting Research Center at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, and he has now begun a PhD in behavioral neuroscience at the University of California, San Diego. He owns over 70 patents in lighting technology and continues to research new applications for lighting. Now, Robert has a very unique background, one that incorporates physics and engineering, and so we had to bring him onto this podcast. Now, throughout our journey here on Medicine Redefined, we've touched many times on circadian rhythms, lighting, blue light, and even how to really use it for our mornings and nights. But given Robert's background, I really wanted to bring him on to talk about lighting, especially for productivity and work. Given his background working with NASA scientists, I thought this would be an awesome chance so that we can learn how to become more productive, how we can think about lighting in a work from home setting, or if we go into our offices. Now, if you go to the show notes, Robert has known to create something called Skyview, which is a lighting device that we can use in our own home. If you visit our show notes at the bottom, you can get a code for 20% off by using the code REDEFINE20. I highly encourage you to check this product out, just given that the website is even incredible. All right, let's get to the episode. Robert, pleasure having you on the Medicine Redefined podcast. Thank you so much. We're talking offline. I was just telling you that I'm super excited about this podcast. We've had guests come on to this podcast to talk about light, blue light blockers, what light is, how it works with circadian lighting. But I'm really excited to have you on because I think your background is super unique, right? From an engineering perspective, from a physics perspective. And I think delving into that is going to be really eye-opening for a lot of our audience. The other thing that we're privileged with is that we wake up, the sun comes out, we know what's going to happen, it's going to set, and then it comes back the next day, right? But very rarely do we actually think about what's happening, like what light is, how we evolved with it. Do you mind just, we can get nerdy here, that's fine, going through the basics about what is light actually?
Electromagnetic energy that our eyes can pick up. So there's tons of electromagnetic radiation throughout the world. And this is just stuff that our eyes can sense. So by definition, 380 nanometers to 780 nanometers is what light is. The shorter wavelength is 380, and that's more than the violet range. And the 780 is closer to the reds. You have your kind of Roy G. Biv as you go back. And so in our eyes, we know of really kind of 5 different photoreceptors that are looking for light. And there's really only 2 that are going to the visual cortex that processes vision. So that means there's 3 other ones that are doing other things. And that's what we're really interested in, is the other stuff that light is doing. So, and I think that's why this topic of light for health and light being fundamental to health is so overlooked by the general population, is because it's not what you see. And you do see light, so you feel like you know everything about it. I always think about it, it's like, what we know about the ear, right? So obviously the obvious thing it does is it's for hearing, but the vestibular system is also regulated by the ear, right? So balance, we don't even really think about that, right? And so in the same way, the eye has 2 functions, which is the visual thing, the obvious thing, and there are non-obvious things that light is doing through the eye. And so the big one, at least as it relates to this topic, is circadian rhythms. It's a daytime photoreceptor. So I talked about 3 new photoreceptors that we know. They're called opsin 3, 4, and 5. Opsin 1 is rods. Opsin 2 is the cones, which is broken up into 3 subtypes: red, green, and blue, or short, medium, and long wavelengths. But opsin 3, 4, and 5 are kind of more geared towards the blue end of the spectrum. And they're doing some very interesting things. The one we know most about is melanopsin, which is OPN4. And this is a daytime, it's a sky blue photoreceptor. So it has peak sensitivity in the long wavelength blue. Everyone talks about blue light and how it's detrimental to our health, and it's keeping us up at night. But really, the data is saying that it's not all blues the same, but it's a long wavelength blue that drives the circadian responses to light. And so what it does and what this photoreceptor does, I mean, your question was, what is light? But I don't know if you want me to just jump into like circadian rhythms and kind of how this intersection is with biology.
Yeah, no, please do. I think the fact that you even highlighted that it's like the ear, right? I love that analogy because, again, you're right. I mean, we look at light and we're like, oh, we see it. What else is there, right? And like you said, there's more and more research coming out. We're starting to understand there's different frequencies that other animals that can see that the human species can't. So I think that relates very well with this. So yeah, why don't you go ahead and just talk about how it relates to circadian rhythm?
Yeah, so these receptors, the OPN4 sky blue receptors, they go to different parts of the brain. They don't go to the parts that regulate vision. They go to parts that regulate mood. The parts that regulate our circadian rhythms, our pupil size, our brightness perceptions, our cognition. So it's going to all these other regions of the brain. And really what it boils down to is it's a daytime photoreceptor that's really taking, it's a sky blue photoreceptor looking at where that blue sky is. And when it's there, guess what time it is? It's daytime. It's time to be alert, time to be vigilant, time to be aware, time to go out and do stuff. And when that blue signal's gone, that's the time to recover, repair, and get ready for the next day. And so it's actually really, one, fundamental, because before electric lighting, it was the only thing we had, right? And now the problem that we have is that we built up these walls, and now that signal is completely, obscured. We don't have, the days aren't bright enough, and the nights are too bright.
Yeah, no, it's a real problem. It's a real issue. Many more people are talking about it. Let's transition on the same topic now into BIOS, which is the company that you're a part of. You talk about having a biology approach, right? Oftentimes with BIOS. So what does that mean exactly when it comes to light, having that biology approach? And what is BIOS? What does your company do?
Yeah, so we are a NASA spinoff. So I started the company 8 years ago, and we were just looking at exactly this, looking at light completely different, about what the biology is telling us. So not light for vision, but light for health, wellness, circadian rhythms. We have another side that's focused on plant growth. How do you tailor the spectrum of light to promote biological responses or biological health and well-being? So we are looking at all the parameters that are important for health and wellness. I'll focus on health and wellness because I feel like this audience cares probably a little bit more about that side of things. So what are the parameters? What are the colors? What are the spectrums of light? How does it need to change throughout the day? And how do we have something that's like individualized? Because the problem and why we love electric light so much is because it allows us to do whatever we want on our schedule. We don't all have to operate according to when the sun's up and when the sun goes down. As medical practitioners, shift work is a real 24 hours a day is when you guys are going, and you couldn't do that without electric lighting. And so it's really about circadian rhythms doesn't have to be tied to the sun. If you have, just like on space station, if you have a strong enough electrical signal that is giving the same 24-hour cycle, you could synchronize to that and you could promote better health just by having something that's a robust cue. I think that is what we're most passionate about, is creating something that's going to be biologically meaningful. And I won't talk about any other products that are out there, but a lot of times there's kind of more gimmicky things that will change the color over the course of the day. And, visually that feels like a lot's going on. You could see it happen, but that's the obvious thing. But what we're looking for is the non obvious thing that our eyes are doing. So, doing something that just, adheres to the color is really not doing a whole lot meaningful to our biology. And so what we have been kind of doing is coming up with ways to, give us all steps in the right direction of better health and well-being. And the concept is actually really simple. Brighter days and darker nights is what we need. What we've done is we've put ourselves inside with days that are too dim and nights that are too bright. So the delineation of day versus night is not very obvious to our biology. And so, the consequence of doing this, the problem in a nutshell is that lack of delineation causes our circadian rhythms to drift. And it causes this proliferation of chronotypes, which is our preference, our night owlisms, or our early birdisms. And, you might think so. The consequence primarily of, days that are too dim and nights that are too bright is that we tend to drift to more night owlism. And if you're listening to this, you might go, well, that's so what? I wake up a little bit later. But all the data says that that's really bad for us, that we should be waking up early. And so the consequence of this kind of circadian disruption, this kind of drift, is one, that this seems to be at odds with our health and wellness. So we see, as a result of being a night owl, higher risk of depression, higher risk of obesity, higher risk of cardiovascular disorders. There's higher risk of metabolic disorders, mood disorders, mental health issues, all across the board, attention deficits, you name it. And it really is, it it's surprising to most people to hear that, but when you understand that there's so much going on, and a robust and, constant circadian rhythm aligns not just our sleep and wake cycle, but so many things have to happen at specific times. I mean, there's as a practitioner, I think that one of the interesting things that are coming out is things like chronotherapy, which is not looking at what medicine to take, but when to take it. Because our rhythms will change throughout the day. Our enzymes activities will change throughout the day. Our hormones will change throughout the day. So there's a best time to take any kind of medication, just based on your circadian rhythm. So, you could even think about a whole emerging field of, medicine is, you know, doing stuff according to circadian time. And I know every doctor is super busy, but rhythm, you could change rhythms to be in line with what makes the most sense for that doctor to be able to get that drug administered most effectively. I think that that's something really interesting for a lot of people.
No, for sure. I think one of the most recent ones I heard was vitamin D, right? I mean, obviously you're getting sunlight during the day. So there's this theory about taking vitamin D actually in the morning, right? Or around that 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. time frame, because that's probably when it's going to be most activated. And we know vitamin D is a hormone, is a steroid. It does just so much and, affects many biochemical reactions in our body. And so that's exactly what you're touching on. Interesting about the chronotypes, I know there's like those quizzes that you can take online. And I wonder whether people almost get fooled by thinking that when they take those, it confirms their own bias about, oh, I am a night owl. So now I should be actually staying up even later at night. Is there a role of genetics, or do you think this is almost primarily what you see in society now, just due to our unhealthy habits and relationship with light?
Yeah, well, I'll give you an example. There was a group in Boulder, Colorado, that took a bunch of college students on a camping trip, 2-day camping trip. And so they measured their chronotype, so the melatonin onset of things. So melatonin, as we probably all know, is a sleep hormone. You can get it over the counter, but our body produces it naturally. It usually comes um, 2 hours after kind of the sun has set. Um, that's when it starts ramping up. So you get a good sense of your circadian rhythm based on when that starts rising. So they measured these students before they went on the camping trip. Then they went camping, had no exposure to exterior light. I'm sorry, electric light. All exterior light was the only thing they had. Um, and they all completely changed their chronotype. They went from being night owls to being early birds in 2 days, in just 2 days of light exposure, of natural light exposure, I should say. So it does absolutely point to this thought that modern society is causing this drift. Now, there's going to be some genetic variations, but that's a pretty compelling study that just 2 days outside can completely shift all these quote unquote night owls who took the surveys and would confirm that they're night owls. And yet, after 2 days of camping, they showed them that they're not that at all.
Yeah, yeah, that's absolutely impressive. It gets me also just thinking about just being natural, right? You talk about how this was natural light, and I think a lot of people would push for that, right? If they're trying to go through therapy or therapeutics, it would be quote unquote something natural. It's almost like a buzzword. But with what you're doing, would you
Yeah.
say it's possible to create these natural environments artificially through technology that we now have?
Yeah, so that's a great point. I obviously the most natural thing is to go outside and you listen to anyone first thing in the morning, that's the best time to get outside and that is the ideal scenario. But we can't be outside all the time. We used to be outside all the time. Um, and so what are you going to do? Getting outside every now and then is great, but when we talk about early morning light, that's really a circadian thing. That actually kind of tells your body it's daytime, tells you circadian rhythms that it's daytime to start that daytime counter for that, daytime signal. Um, but what I mentioned before is that these receptors go to all sorts of regions of your brain that drive mood, cognition, alertness, vigilance, all the daytime effects. So we created a lighting system that pinpoints these receptors that drive this natural response. And so if you're inside and you have light exposure to this specific light, the light's called Skyview, we saw everything you'd expect: boosts in alertness, boosts in mood, boosts in cognition. Um, we also saw a boost in sleep because they got that exposure during the day, brighter days, darker nights. But, the early morning light is a circadian response that helps your circadian rhythms, but all those daytime responses that are important for you, you know, remembering things at the office, getting, being as productive as you possibly could be, we saw those things as well. And so as long as we work inside these buildings, you want to bring as much as you possibly can. Sit next to a window, get as much light exposure you can, because when you're working, you're triggering those daytime receptors that are telling your body it's daytime. So I need to do these daytime things and do them as best as I can. So it's good for our health. It's good for our productivity. It's good for pretty much everything.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I can already see that how bios or how lighting can really influence even the workforce, right? You go to a tall building, you're sitting by cubicles, and you just mentioned like people having those corner offices. Man, they must be in a way better mood, and it might not just be the view that they have, but also that light coming in.
Yeah.
But I think it's important. Can we talk about the different types of lighting? There's LEDs, there's different types of bulbs, there's light coming from the screen. What do people need to know, just basics, kind of foundations about the different types of lighting that are out there, maybe what might be best for them?
Great question. So there's a couple things that I think are a little bit of misnomers. LEDs get a bad rap for, producing too much blue light, and the screens coming from it is too blue. And that's partially true. Those screens are very bright, though. I think that that's a bigger issue. Some of the studies that have been looking at this, night shift for your iPhone, that removes some of the blue wavelengths of it. But, if you just reduce the brightness down, that's going to have a much more dramatic impact than the color of the light itself. Um, Same thing with like the LED light bulbs and downlights. You know, a lot of people say, oh, they look too bright and they're like, it's messing my rhythm. And that's true. It's the brightness more than the blue that's causing that alertness. And that's a really big misnomer because everyone talks about the blue light from these LEDs. And when you look at, if somebody like wants to like get scientific, they'll show a spectral power distribution. They'll see this peak of blue light um, on that LED spectrum. And that's true, but it was absolutely engineered for vision. Where it pinpoints is exactly where our blue perception is. So LED lights for the same looking color light, you know, when you go to Home Depot, they have like soft white, bright white, and daylight. If you had a LED versus a old, you know, the fluorescent, incandescent only really comes in one color, or like a halogen is kind of that bright white. LED has the least amount of blue for the same looking light. And that's hard for people to get their head around. So it's really just about because again, it was designed for vision, and it was not designed for biology. So the consequence of that is, I think that the way that I look at it is, we optimized LED lighting is absolutely engineered for the one thing that we knew how to measure, which was lumens. Is a metric that we use for brightness. And so lighting design and everything that goes in those commercial buildings, everything that I was, you know, when I originally became interested in lighting, was about to reduce the amount of watts needed to get the same visual response. And LEDs was absolutely designed to pinpoint the visual receptors specifically. And now that we know that there's something else to measure, it's so far off. So standard lighting design, and with the standard LEDs, and the other bad thing is when you have all these lights are in the ceiling pointing down, that's great for lighting the surfaces, lighting the floors, but we need that light here in our face. And so the combination of the visually optimized spectrum and the visually optimized design has led us to being about, in the daytime, like a third. We get about a third of the light that we need from a wellness standpoint. So we're really putting ourselves in the dark here. And that's what we've been trying to do with the new Skyview product, is put the light where we need it to be, more visually, more vertically oriented, the right spectrums, the right wavelengths, the right intensities, so that you have something that gives you that alertness profile. And we did a clinical research on it, simulated workday. We saw exactly all the things that, you know, you should expect to see.
Right. Wow. So let's delve into spatial distribution. When I saw this on your website, I was absolutely wowed. I just didn't even realize it was a concept to be even thinking about. But why don't you explain how this spatial distribution of light actually makes a difference? You touched on it a little bit, but I know that even peripheries make a difference, and below versus above.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, for the listeners, tune into the video version of this. We'll try to get on social media so that they can see exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. So these receptors, if anyone knows anything about vision, so we have rods and cones, and then they go through these like inner cellular processing things, bipolar cells, bilateral cells, and stuff like that. And they go to these retinal ganglion cells, and the retinal ganglion cells send the information to the brain. Well, some of these retinal ganglion cells are intrinsically photosensitive, which means that these have those receptors, those sky blue receptors. And so what's really interesting about that is our vision is really very acute in that central field of view called our fovea. And so it's just a ton of cones in there that are getting all that accuracy and precision that we need. And it's not occluded by any of those, you know, retinal ganglion cells or other, you know, things. It's just a cluster of cones. And so these receptors aren't in that foveal vision. So we call it the 2-degree field. So I have this microphone here, but 2 thumbs out, you know, arm distance away, that little circle is your foveal vision. And so that's where all the cones are, the highest density of cones. Everywhere else is where these sky blue receptors are. So it's basically it's not what you're looking at. It's everywhere but where you're looking at that these receptors are. And so some research has even shown that the ones on the bottom hemisphere are more sensitive than the rest of them. And so they're looking for their sky blue signal, looking for that blue sky signal to come from above the horizon plane. It kind of makes almost perfect sense of what we should be expecting it to do is that, and it's looking at all over. So the side periphery is just as good as just above us. So it's almost like that horizon is where the strongest signal for our circadian rhythms is. And it evolutionarily like makes perfect sense. So so what we did when we developed this Skyview Technologies, we did exactly that. Figured out where you're probably. So we designed it to be like at a external monitor or a laptop. Just go right next to it, where those receptors, not where you're looking at, but where those receptors are looking at. Put the majority of the stuff above the horizon plane, giving you the benefits you need with no more energy, no more any annoyance or anything like that. It's just a really pleasant light um, that gives you what you need from being outside.
That's phenomenal, right? It just makes me think about how many of us from work from home nowadays, especially since COVID, maybe quote unquote doing this wrong, right? If I can say doing it wrong, or at least a different way of optimizing, which is really cool. So horizon meaning almost level, or how do you kind of gauge that, right? If somebody were trying to do this on their own, trying to optimize their desk, would you just recommend almost getting like a standing desk or putting yourself a little bit lower?
Yeah, so it really goes at your gaze. So what we think about it is if you're staring at a computer screen, which I am right now, Skyview's right next to it. And then that horizon is kind of at the center of the screen. We have a smaller one. If you have a laptop, again, the idea is exactly the same. So it's the horizon isn't about like where our head position is. It's retinal, so it's wherever your eyes are looking at that you're going to get that best benefit from having the bluest the bluest light and the bluest photons above that horizon plane.
Gotcha. Now, is Skyview pretty much customized per individual? For instance, if I'm somebody who's a night owl, need to kind of adjust my circadian rhythm to be a little bit better versus somebody who, let's say, sleeps on time, gets up on time, feels awake, but then they hit that 2 o'clock p.m., they get really drowsy. Or is Skyview essentially kind of just working globally in the sense that it's going to just make you feel better overall throughout the day, just given that it's the right amount of blue light, right brightness, all that?
Yeah, so it really depends on use case. So we designed it with an app, and the app could use the local understanding of local sunrise and sunset to basically do what's going on outside. Or you could input your wake up and bedtime, and so with that you could basically tailor it to wake up with you, go to bed with you. So from work from home, that's the ideal solution. Um, you know, if but we really designed it to be in the office.
Okay.
That was the main goal when we put it out there, was that all these people talk about lighting to help your sleep, and that is such a random thing to tell people, that something that's not in your bedroom is going to help you sleep. Is like, you know it's kind of like, I've made this analogy because we talk to a lot of sleep doctors. It's like almost if you said that this treadmill, you're going to buy it to help you sleep better.
Right.
That doesn't sound like anything that anyone would. That's not why anyone buys a treadmill. Um, but it's true. I mean, it's true. If you have trouble sleeping, they tell you to get light and get exercise. Those are the main pillars of trying to promote better sleep. Um, but you don't buy a treadmill for that. You buy it for, you feel better, losing weight, getting shape, the wellness components of it. Um, and the same thing here is that we thought, this idea of selling a light for your sleep is just such a foreign concept for people to think about. We need to design it for productivity, mood, alertness, vigilance for all those people who are struggling to, at 2 p.m., having that post lunch dip, and know that really, you know, that's just not good for me. There's something wrong. Um, that's what it's for. It's for, how you feel during the daytime. And as a result of doing that, you do get better sleep. But the idea of selling people that this light will help you sleep is just, we've learned that, we banged our head on the wall long enough to realize that people just don't understand that concept.
Yeah, for sure. And I love that you mentioned that, right? Because sleep is a getting good night's sleep is a byproduct of what you do during the day, right? For the majority of it, I believe. And
That's right.
I'm in the camp of when you look at the pillars. A lot of people like to break down the pillars of sleep, exercise, nutrition, stress relief. While all of them are important, I am definitely in the camp that I think sleep has the biggest lever that we can pull on for overall health, longevity, wellness. I mean, I just don't think there's a reason otherwise we'd be doing it for this long, for our species, given the amount of risk, survival risk at night and things like that. I just think sleep is still something that is still being researched, right? As far as theories go and things like that. So I'm definitely a big component and proponent, I should say, of getting that good night's sleep for everything else to kind of go right. So I do love that you said that. Um,
Yeah.
one of the things I saw on your website too was talking about how light, no matter what, is activating. People have this misconception of thinking that red light, fire, the amber colors are actually soothing and can put you to sleep. Can you touch a little bit on that?
Yes, that's a great question. I think that there are some people getting. I actually was recently interviewed about red light because somebody came out with a red light product for helping you sleep, and they quoted my light on space station as a reason why that's the case. And I said that that's absolutely false. There's no light is the only thing that could help you with sleep. Any other light is only alerting. It's only going to wake you up. In fact, there's research going on in shift work applications that say if you get red light, that actually has a nice alerting effect, and it doesn't shift your circadian rhythms because it's absent of all the blue, but it has this alertness to it, and so it's not soothing at all. Dim light, and if you have to have light, sure, you could have something that's amber. I personally think red is just a little bit too foreign. You're doing trying to do a little bit too much. You got to be able to render colors. You got to be able to see things, not have to strain yourself in order to, see what's in the cup. Um, so I think amber dim is kind of the ideal approach. It is, it's relaxing, but I don't think that it's relaxing in the sense that it's actually actively putting you to sleep. It's just not as alerting as something that's more intense and more blue. So it's got to be, one I always talk about as warm as possible and as dim as dim as, as is acceptable, and then, we talk about the spatial distribution below the horizon to try to keep that light low and below the horizon. And that is a really good start for how to do light at night.
Gotcha. So I'm afraid people are going to say, "Well, I always have my phone below me when before I go to sleep." Um,
Well, so that of course, okay, well that's a great point that you bring that up because again, it's about where you're looking relative to where you're looking. So if you're looking right at your phone, um, it I always think just keep it down, dim as possible. If you could keep it far away, that would also be nice because remember it's everywhere but where you're looking at. So if you have it close, then it's going to get all those receptors. But if you keep it further away, you're going to do a lot better. Um, so you know, every sleep researcher will tell you that everyone should stop their phones 2 hours before bedtime, and that's great. That is sound advice. And if you get three people to do it, that good on you. But the masses are just not going to do
yeah,
it,
for
right?
sure, absolutely. Yeah, there's
We're, so I mean, I think that's kind of how I see it. Dark mode, great. Um, Even the things that when you're watching a show. Um, Michael Herf is a guy who invented Flux that basically reduces the blue content in your screen. They did it before Night Shift, long before Night Shift. Um, and he was telling me that what's on your screen is so content dependent. So if you have a white screen, yeah, you might get a decent dose, but if you put on a movie, it could reduce it down by 90%. So you're only getting 10% of that light because it's dark backgrounds, and all those pixels are just being occluded by the filters. So it's so content driven, and I think the majority of the research is showing that if you have standard content, the light coming out of it is not enough to have a dramatic impact. Now, I will not say that you should actively go use your phone, that I'm telling you to go use your phone at night and have no detrimental impacts to it. But I think some people who are crying wolf about the detriments of cell phone use at night. All the studies that I've seen are kind of white screens, fully full brightness, full blue. If you just look at it as standard applications, it's significantly reduced, and it's not nearly as big of a problem. And I think the bigger problem is light during the daytime. The fact that we're getting a third of what we're supposed to be getting. The other thing that what always shocked me, Pacific Northwest National Laboratory did a study, and I confirmed it here, that even the windows that you get, we think that we're doing enough by having enough windows, but you actually have to be looking out that window in order to do it. So I actually have, my monitors right here. On the other side of it is a giant window. But if I just turn here towards this wall, now I'm getting like 20% of what I would get if I'm looking out that window. So it's significantly dependent on where you go. And I think what's most interesting as we talk about offices is usually what's on the opposite side of that window is the door. So as an employee, you have to decide, do you want to face the window or do you want to face the door? And I think the majority of people prioritize privacy over that view or their biology. So I think that even if you get proper window use, we're still not getting enough. And that's and again, this is what we've always been thinking about, is like, we could tell people what's good for them, but if we don't pay attention to common behavior, it's just going to fall on deaf ears and people aren't going to do it.
For sure. I mean, I think Andrew Huberman is such a huge proponent of, he's always preaching getting up first thing, go outside, get bright light into your eyes, not actually staring at the sun so you go blind, but just getting out there. And, you're really the second person that I'm consistently hearing that we're actually messing up during the day. It's not necessarily just before the wee hours before bedtime, but what we should be doing before the day is really what's hurting us. And so, do you just recommend people getting out as much as possible, or is there an ideal time of the day? Obviously, first thing in the morning, a lot of people say, but if they're unable to do that, do you just recommend walks outside, or what can they do to really optimize during the day?
Yeah, so I think that first thing in the morning obviously is great. That's sound advice. And again, that's for circadian timing. The other key time for circadian timing is at the end of the day, right? So bright light before darkness. So are these circadian receptors also have a little bit of history to them. So what you get before it's all relative. So if you go out at the end of the day, go out for a walk, that's going to set the expectation of what daytime is, and then so night is actually going to feel a lot darker as a result of that. So those are kind of the two things: the beginning of the day, the end of the day. In the middle of the day, it doesn't seem to have as much of an impact. Of course, it does help with those other things: the vigilance, the mood, the alertness. It's a great way if you're feeling sluggish at 2 p.m. That post lunch dip. If you go outside, you're gonna get a boost to your energy level just by getting that light exposure. Fresh air obviously helps as well.
a two-pronged approach to this, one from the circadian and then one from the mood productivity, kind of just being vigilant standpoint.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. But one of the things that I wanted to hit on is a lot of people associate that post lunch dip with, a big lunch, but it's absolutely a circadian process that occurs every single day. And it does, food can exacerbate it, but it's absolutely a circadian process that you have every single day. And we do know that it hits harder if you're sleep deprived. So that's actually a really good test for how sleep deprived you are, is how hard that post lunch dip hits you. Because it really is, you have these alerting circadian signals and it just kind of drops off at that post lunch era. And so what happens is when you lose those alerting signals, that's when all that homeostatic sleep pressure from sleep deprivation starts hitting you so much harder.
Wow. Do you know, is that why there might be a theory for why we did biphasic sleeping, for instance? Or, I mean, typically biphasic sleeping, from what I've heard, is just 4 hours throughout the night and then maybe even 4 hours again. But I'm just trying to think, is there a reason why we know there's that dip in the middle of the day for us biologically?
Yeah, it's a really interesting thought process. So biphasic sleeping is completely different. I have thoughts behind that, um, but I do think that this post lunch dip also corresponds with the hottest part of the day, right? So it kind of makes a lot of sense from an energy conservation standpoint. This isn't when you're supposed, if you're gonna rest and relax, you should probably do it in the middle of the day when it's the most hottest. Go, find some shade and cool off, and not be the most alert and trying to go out and do some things when it's the hottest time, because that's the most resistance you're going to have and the most, potential for, overexerting yourself is to get out that day. For biphasic sleeping, though, when you look at melatonin rhythms, and I think that this is a seasonality component, it's really bimodal. It's not one hump, but it's actually two. And I think that the reason for that is the bimodality, they could separate and they could come back together. And the reason for that is just seasonality differences. When the days are short, the night is long. And so this melatonin rhythm spreads out. And then when you have that dip, that's when, if you wake up in the middle of the night, that's when you're most likely to wake up in the middle of the night, when that melatonin kind of hits a little bit of a trough in the middle. Uh, so, so that's really what I've kind of noticed. And for biphasic sleep, and I don't know, I feel like that's an antiquated thing
Okay.
nowadays
Yeah.
because no, uh, back when we didn't have electric lighting, like that was a real thing. But I don't know anyone who's really, yeah, sleep for a little bit, wake up and actually do something, and then go back to sleep for another 4 hours.
So I was actually forced to kind of do this when I was doing a night shift over at the VA hospital. Luckily, it was kind of quiet overnight, so I would probably get about 4 hours of sleep. I would drive home at about six thirty
Mm,
seven, and then I would probably sleep again for another 2.5, 3 hours. And what's funny is, so I wear a Whoop, and I was just tracking my HRV and everything, and my sleep quality. I shouldn't even say sleep quality. My HRV was at its highest during those months. No idea why. But it was awesome because I had the rest of the
yeah,
day free, and then went back to night shift. But that was kind of the only time where I was
yeah,
kind of forced, or I took advantage of it, I guess I should say, just to get 8 hours of sleep a day. Um, this
yeah.
is super fascinating stuff. Can I just ask you, what are your thoughts on melatonin supplementation, if you have any?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked. I'm so glad you asked. Um, I think I think that the data says so. Melatonin is a hormone that our body produces naturally, and all the science says it doesn't really work. That it doesn't actually help you fall asleep. And the only time that it does, what it does, and what circadian researchers and sleep practitioners that I know use it for, is to shift your circadian rhythm. So light has a phase response curve. So light early in the morning will shift your rhythm to be earlier. Light late at night will shift your rhythm to be late. And the same thing is true, well, the opposite is true really for melatonin. If you take melatonin during the kind of the end of the day, the light period, your rhythm will get shifted earlier. If you take it kind of in the early morning, it'll get shifted later because melatonin is the hormone of nighttime, of kind of darkness. So when melatonin works is if you've shifted your rhythm to be a night owl, then taking melatonin, before you go to bed. A lot of people do it right when you go to bed. That is actually not recommended. When you should be taking it, if you're trying to shift your rhythm, is like 2 to 3 hours before you go to bed, because that's actually when your melatonin rhythm starts producing to begin with, is 2 to 3 hours before you naturally go to bed. So that's actually when you want to take it, is to try to bring that rhythm back together. And really, you should be taking it 1 or 2 times a month, and that's it. Because what you don't want to do is you don't want your body to rely on it and stop producing it naturally.
There's some heavy doses out there. People are taking like 5-10 milligrams. It's heavy doses that in the hospital, at least, that people are asking for. And I'm like, let's lower you down, if anything. But yeah.
Right. So, and the data isn't there to say that it actually helps you sleep. I think that there's a lot of people there's a placebo effect that a lot of people are getting, that they feel like it's going to help them sleep. So they relax themselves and they just think that it's working. But all the markers that sleep researchers use say that it's not doing a whole lot of anything.
Wow. Fascinating stuff. Robert, anything else that you want to bring up for the audience? Anything that I may have missed or that you want to talk about? I feel like we could have another hour's worth of conversation here just by how much you know. I do want to respect your time as well, but we can always get you here for a part 2, maybe even talk about plants, because there might be some plant mom and plant dads out there.
Yeah. I think that the idea and the concepts are actually pretty simple. Brighter days, darker nights is kind of the big takeaway. I think the biggest thing that people overlook is that, light is health. It's really fundamental to health. And that's the important thing. And it's almost like that analogy that I said, treadmill, helps put you to sleep. Lights help, put you to sleep during the daytime. It's such a weird thing, but they're almost the same. They're almost just key pillars to health. And I think that that's what the viewer or listeners should take away from this, is that you never thought light was as important as it is, but I'm here to tell you it absolutely is. And we built these buildings the wrong way, and it's really causing a lot of harm to us.
Yeah, and that's why we brought you on here, man. Thank you. Where can our listeners find you and BIOS and Skyview? Yeah,
so we have a website for the new product, skyviewlight.com. So SKYVIEW light, LIGHT.com. I'm usually throwing out some of the latest research on LinkedIn. So as studies come up, I'm pretty good friends with the leading chronobiologists in the world. So they individually will push their work and their lab's work, but I'm not aligned with any of them. So I push all the good work. If it's good work, it goes on my site and on my page. So the best of the best is usually there. So I think that that's really good. Robert Soler, SOLER, is a good spot.
Awesome. Well, we're going to link those into the show notes. And, I'm kind of it's a weird thing I just noticed. I'm like a fanboy for like very aesthetic websites. Like there's just something pleasurable about scrolling through, and your Skyview website's actually like absolutely phenomenal. Like it's very aesthetically pleasing. I was just going through like nonstop on there and be like, wow, I like how the colors change. So yeah, people should definitely check it out is what I'm trying to say. Awesome, man.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I know it's good stuff. All right, last question we ask everyone is, how do we add the health back to healthcare? Because we know it's a broken system.
Yeah, it's I think that it is a broken system. They want you to be sick, right? That's the problem with it. And, they don't want you. I mean, this is proactive healthcare, right? This is really, improving your health so you don't get sick. Yeah, I don't know, man. This is such a great question, is how do you stay out of the hospital? How do you have healthcare to stay out of the hospital? Well, the healthcare system doesn't want you to do that. They want you in the hospital. Otherwise they don't get paid. Um, so, I would love to hear your answer to that, because I think that we need to really start focusing on preventative care.
Yeah, no, I think you nailed it right there, man. Is that right now it's reactive and we got to go proactive. And it's I think from your standpoint, what you're doing with lighting and things, like just educating these, I think that's why I love bringing you on here, man. Is just that it's such a unique perspective, one that our listeners have not heard, one that they didn't even really know that there's things coming out to really help us, right? And I think that's like the beauty of this consumerism trend that's happening in medicine, is that we're going from a medicine 2.0 to a 3.0. And in this 3.0, we're really telling patients to, be their own patient in a way, right? Like, don't just rely on the doctor to kind of tell you everything, because I mean, there's so much, right? There's so much misinformation. There's just so much research to know. And I love having that therapeutic alliance with patients so that they can be their best support system, right? And I think looking into things like Skyview, doing things like BIOS, I think that's just gonna only help people be enlightened, no pun intended, to the things that are out there that really help the other factors like sleep, exercise, etc. Right? So it's all about the being well, and yeah, going from there. So
yeah, I couldn't agree more, man. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Well, hey, I appreciate you coming on here. You're doing brilliant work. I'm excited to follow you on LinkedIn and keep up with the latest research. And are there already Skyview products out, or are we waiting for those to be launched?
Well, yeah. So as of this recording, I know which is not the publication date. So June 20th, the Skyview 2 is being launched. I think in August, our Skyview 2 Pro, which is the larger one, is being launched. We have had the Skyview version 1. It's been out for about 2 years now. But I think that people have not had the opportunity to really see it and really appreciate it, because we had this whole pandemic thing.
Sure. Yeah.
that kept people from actually getting out and seeing things and seeing what's new in the world.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's available. It's commercially available now. And when this podcast comes out, it'll be commercially available.
Awesome. Yep. We'll link that in
all across the board.
Fantastic.
Yeah, we should probably get you a coupon code or something for listeners.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, well, email me and then we'll get it in there so listeners can take advantage of that, because I'm super excited about this. So
awesome, man.
All right, thanks, Robert. Appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate you.
And that's a wrap for this episode. Once again, be sure to check out the show notes where we have linked the Skyview website and the product. If you want 20% off, use the code REDEFINED20. That special offer will not be lasting forever. I think it lasts for about 2 weeks. So make sure you go ahead and check out the website and the product, especially if you know people who are working from home after the pandemic. This product would be a great, great gift. Or just something if you need a mood booster, if you really want to set your circadian rhythm with proper lighting, this is the product for you. As always, the disclaimer, everything in this podcast is for educational purposes only. It does not constitute the practice of medicine, and we are not providing medical advice. No physician-patient relationship is formed, and anything discussed in this podcast does not represent the views of our employers. We recommend that you seek the guidance of your personal physician regarding any specific health-related issues. If you enjoyed this episode, please go ahead and give it 5 stars and make sure to share it with somebody you love. And I'd like to thank our team, Haritha Yepuri and Ethan Ju, for the production of this podcast. We'll see you next week.